Before God delivered the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai, He instructed the people to prepare carefully. They washed their clothes and consecrated themselves. They were told to be ready on the third day. And even husbands and wives refrained from marital relations to devote their full attention to God. At the same time, they were cautioned not to touch the mountain and not to cross the established boundaries. These preparations served as a reminder to Israel that they were about to enter into a covenant relationship with the Holy God. Maranatha Study TV presents the Sabbath School Lesson Summary on Lesson 8, titled Covenant at Sinai. Memory text: You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Exodus 19:4-6. Have you ever wondered why God gave the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai? And what Paul meant when he said, Christ is the end of the law? This week's lesson makes it clear. Sunday. At Mount Sinai, before God gave Israel the 10 Commandments, He first talked with them in Exodus 19:1-8. He reminded them how He saved them from Egypt, told them His plan to make them His special people, and asked for their agreement. The people accepted and said, All that the Lord has spoken we will do. This shows that God wanted a relationship with His people, not just rules. Their obedience was to be their response to His love and covenant. God also wanted Israel to live differently from the nations around them. By obeying Him and worshipping only Him, they would reflect His character. Just like a soldier's uniform shows he belongs to the army, Israel's holiness was their uniform, showing they belonged to God. In the same way, the church today is called to be God's special people. We are to be like a bridge, connecting others to Him through love, service, and truth. Just as Israel was chosen to show the world who God is, we too are chosen to reflect Jesus in our lives, so that others can be drawn to Him. Monday. Preparing for the gift when God was about to provide the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. He asked them to wash their clothes, consecrate themselves, and avoid defilement. God was teaching Israel and us that before we come into His presence, we must prepare inwardly and outwardly. On that day, God descended from the mountain in glory. Thunder, lightning, and thick clouds were present. The scene was terrifying and shocking. It reminded them that the God they served was holy and powerful. God was showing them that He must never be approached carelessly. Worship requires reverence and holy fear. The commandments are recorded twice, first at Sinai in Exodus 20, and later in Deuteronomy 5, when Moses repeated them to Israel before entering the Promised Land. Although there are minor differences, the message remains the same. Paul later explained that the law is summed up in love, because God Himself is love. Emphasis in Deuteronomy highlights God's saving grace and practical lessons for Israel before entering Canaan. Tuesday, the gift of the decalogue. God's 10 Commandments are not just rules, but eternal words of life, like a handwritten love letter from God, given to bring order, healing, and freedom. At their core, they express love for God and neighbors, protecting and blessing us like a parent's care for their children. God gave the 10 Commandments after saving Israel from Egypt, showing that grace comes before the law. The commandments are not rules to earn salvation, but a response of love. They teach us how to love. The first 4 guide us in loving God, putting Him first, avoiding idols, honoring His name, and keeping the Sabbath holy. The last 6 guide us in loving others, honoring parents, valuing life, being faithful, respecting property, speaking the truth, and being content. Jesus said, If you love me, keep my commandments, reminding us that obedience is love in action, flowing from gratitude for His salvation. Wednesday. Different functions of God's law. Here are the different functions of God's law. 1. It reveals God's character. By looking at the law, we see what God is like. The law shows that God is holy, righteous, and good. 2. It defines sin and acts like a mirror. The law exposes what is wrong in us, but cannot fix us, reminding us that we need a Savior, not self-righteousness. 3. It guides daily life with wisdom and teaches right choices, and keeps us from evil, bringing understanding, peace, and stability to life. 4. It protects like a fence. The law sets safe boundaries, so we can live freely, showing that outside God's limits lie danger, pain, and death. 5. It points us to Christ like a signpost. That means the law reveals our need and directs us to Jesus, who alone forgives and changes us, leading to wholeness in life. 8. The law provides the righteous standard by which all are judged, showing why the gospel is essential. Thursday. The law is God's promise for us. In Hebrew, the 10 Commandments are called the 10 words. The word dibir can also mean promise. This means that the commandments are not just strict demands, but also God's promise of what He will make possible for His people. For example, when God says, "You shall not steal," He's not only giving a rule, but also promising to change our hearts, so that we no longer desire to steal. The law shows us how to live, but it is also God's pledge to shape us into people who reflect His character if we trust and obey Him. Romans 10:4 says, "For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believes." Some preachers believe that this means that the law ended with Christ, and that the 10 Commandments are no longer needed. They believe that Christians only need love. However, Paul did not mean that. In Romans 3:31, Paul says, "Do we then make void the law through faith? Certainly not. On the contrary, we establish the law. Sin is defined as the act of breaking God's law in 1 John 3:4. If there were no laws, sin would not exist." Romans 10:4 means that Christ is the purpose of the law. He shows us what true righteousness is and helps us to follow it. Friday. Further thought. The law was not spoken at this time exclusively for the benefit of the Hebrews. God honored them by making them the guardians and keepers of His law, but it was to be held as a sacred trust for the whole world. The precepts of the decalogue are adapted to all mankind, and they were given for the instruction and government of all. Patriarchs and Prophets, page 305. If you want this gospel message to reach more people, please hit the subscribe button on the screen. Like and share this video. Doing so helps YouTube recommend it to more viewers. The comment section is open for reactions. Thank you for studying this lesson with us. Goodbye and remain blessed. Until we meet next week.